When a devoted spiritual leader walks away from their community, the outside world usually assumes they lost their belief in God. A sudden loss of theology rarely explains these departures. The exodus is the final step in a compounding cycle of shame, embarrassment, and deep emotional isolation. Over time, the daily friction of church operations wears that devotion down, first into passivity, then total apathy, and finally a crushing despondency, often at the hands of the very people they lead. Stepping out the doors is a survival response to a toxic environment, rather than a rejection of belief itself. In a congregation, marginalization operates through the slow process of pushing a pastor to the social and political edges of the church, treating their personal and emotional well-being as completely unimportant. This diagram illustrates the core psychological shift. A faith community usually starts as an interconnected network, but under pressure, it devolves into a rigid, transactional flowchart. The people in the congregation effectively become a board of directors. They take on the role of corporate judges, measuring their leaders' worth against metrics of what they consider acceptable work. The emotional degradation of this arrangement is severe. A spiritual guide is stripped of their relational calling and reduced to the mindset of a servant, a hired hand. This horizontal pressure turns a sacred duty into a conditional performance review that never ends. Eventually, the damage from the congregation bleeds upward, severing the pastor's personal connection to the holy. We can visualize this spiritual relationship as a direct vertical connection line between an individual and God. As the transactional demands of the congregation pile up, they act as heavy horizontal barriers, systematically cutting off the individual's access to their faith. The resulting spiritual distortion isolates the leader. The creator no longer feels like a loving parent, but instead becomes distant, shrouded behind an impenetrable psychological veil. This creates a trap of conditional faith. The individual starts believing they can only reach through that veil if they successfully correct whatever flaws the congregation has identified. When a divine calling is reduced to standard employment, the human mind reconstructs God from a loving creator into an unpleasable CEO. There is a breaking point where this spiritual barrenness becomes unbearable. When that happens, retreat is the only option left. For this author, survival meant choosing a secular life, specifically driving a truck. Taking this job was a search for an honest environment where the rules made sense. The isolation of secular labor offers a stark contrast to the church. In the cab of a truck, there is no gossip. There are no shifting goalposts dictating a person's worth. Instead, there is relief in a straightforward transaction. An employer wants a practical skill, and they respect the driver enough to pay for it without emotional manipulation. Protecting your actual faith sometimes requires abandoning the religious institution that is actively destroying it. Inside this quiet space, the wilderness becomes a sanctuary. It provides the isolation required for honest reflection. Wandering into the wilderness allows those broken by conditional love to regain control and survive.